Likutei Sichos, Chelik Chav, Volume 20, the second Sicha for Parshas Vayigash. This Sicha will discuss the significance of the 70 souls, of the 70 descendants of Yaakov who descended to Egypt, as described in this week's Parsha, and also we'll discuss the purpose, the objective of the descent of Yaakov's family to Mitzrayim, and we'll highlight the essence, the greatness of the feminine aspect of things. We will skip several chapters, that is chapter 11 and 12, and even chapter 9 and 10 will only be a quick synopsis. Just as a quick introduction to familiarize ourselves with some of the concepts that will be mentioned in the Sicha. Number one, we know that there are 70 nations, and those 70 nations are represented by the, quote, 70 ministering angels up in heaven. These 70 nations were established by the Dor HaFloga, by the Tower of Babel, that Hashem, it says, divided the world into 70 nations, and from there descend and spring off all the nations that we know today. Another thing, the name of Hashem, Elokim, we know it connects to nature. In fact, the word Elokim is the gematria, as the same numerical value of the word nature, and this represents koyach, as it says in halacha, the koyach, the power source, the energy of each and everything. For example, as we'll see in the Sicha, when Hashem said at Mount Sinai, the beginning of the Ten Commandments, he says, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem, your Elokim, your God. That says that I, Hashem, from the very highest point, becomes your actual day-to-day source of energy, so to speak. Another thing to be familiar with, Matan Torah. What exactly was accomplished by the giving of the Torah? So we know that there was a decree, there was a split between the spiritual realm and the material realm, between, so to speak, this world and the upper worlds, and Matan Torah abolished that decree, that split, that breakaway, and allowed now for us to bring the two together. Another thing to be familiar with, we have the four worlds, Abiyah, which is acronym for Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, Asira. In general, they divide in two categories. We have Atzilus, which is the highest and the loftiest, and is typically considered to be a level so high that it has no connection, no interaction with this lowly world. In other words, it's totally and absolutely pure. And as the name of it says, Atzilus, which means Etzloi, by him, it is connected and so close to Hashem. And the only way it evolves into this world and trickles down is only by means of the other three worlds, as you go lower and lower, starting with Bria, Yitzira, and then going all the way down to Asiya. Another thing to be familiar with, we know, the Chazal tell us, the sages tell us, that in the prophecy of Ezekiel, where it says that it describes that there was a Merkava, a chariot, well, the sages tell us that Ha'avos hein ha-Merkava. Our patriarchs, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they are the Merkava, meaning they were like a chariot to Hashem, which basically means, and as it will be explained in the Sicha, they hail from and are in the level of Atzilus, which is so perfectly bottled to Hashem. It is so absolutely subservient to Hashem because it's purely good, that's where they were, that their desire is really Hashem's desire. Hashem's desire is only desire that they have. Now, of course, these are only very rare neshamas, very rare souls. Very few souls hail from Atzilus. One final thing, the Sphira of Malchus, the last of all the 10 spheres, of all the 10 attributes, is considered to be the feminine aspect of things. And in the one hand, it is considered to be the lowliest. It is the lowest of all the levels. In fact, so low that as the Alter Rebbe expresses in Likutei Torah, he quotes from the Kabbalah that Ragleha Yordes Mavis, that it can go so low that it can actually touch and go low to the lowest levels, even the levels of, quote, death, where there is no godliness. However, on the other hand, this attribute, this aspect of things, is associated firmly and exclusively with the idea of emunah, simple, basic faith, inherent faith in Hashem. Let's go into the Parsha. So in our Parsha, into the Sicha. In our Parsha, chapter 46, verse 27, it describes there all the descendants of Yaakov. It enumerates all of them who came down to Mitzrayim, and it concludes, it says, Kol hanefesh haba Yaakov, all the souls, all the descendants of Yaakov that came down, and it concludes with the words, Haba Mitzrayim, that came to Mitzrayim, Shivim nafesh, are 70 souls, 70 descendants. Now, of course, when you tally up all the names of those mentioned, you can only reach the number 69. And the question becomes, who is the 70th? Who exactly accounted for the full number of 70? We know that Yosef and his two sons were counted, but that's after 66 that it enumerates explicitly, and then it says Yosef and his two sons, you only have 69. So there are three opinions. We have the opinion of the Gemara, which is quoted in Rashi, meaning it becomes Pshutei Shel Mikra, and that is that Yocheved, who later is the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu, Yocheved, the daughter of Levi, she completed the number of 70. She was conceived along the way, and she was born as they entered Mitzrayim. That's one opinion. Another opinion is from Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, which says, quote, HaKadosh Baruch Hu nichnas imayim. Hashem himself went in with them, and he filled that number of 70. Then there is a third opinion, which appears in several of the commentaries, the prominent commentaries on the Chumash, and that says that Yaakov was counted with them. Now, we need to understand what really is behind these differences of opinion, these three opinions. In other words, it's not just opinions being thrown out. There's some significance here. There's some essence here. What is it? Moreover, if you think about it, if you really analyze the opinions, when you break it down, you'll see that there's an extreme difference between these opinions. According to the opinions that it was Yaakov and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yaakov and Hashem himself, you're saying that it's the loftiest of levels that joined them to complete the number 70. Whereas if you say that it was this little newborn baby, a little girl that was just born, it is almost like the lowliest. Somebody's not even functioning, somebody who doesn't even have any expression, so to speak, because she's still a baby. A little girl who was just born, a little baby. So the question is, what does this really all mean? What does this all represent? And one more last question. It's obvious whether you say that it was Yocheved who completed the number, or you say that it was Hashem himself who completed the number, but you're saying that it wasn't Yaakov. 1 second. Yaakov came down to Egypt. Why should he not be part of this count? In other words, it would make sense that he is the first to be counted. He is the one who came, and then his descendants came with him. Why would he not be counted as part of this tally? Another general question that one could ask, and in the generality of the matter, is in the verse that it says, Kol hanefesh haba Mitzrayim, and it's in that verse where it describes who came to Egypt. It describes them after enumerating all the sons of Leah and of Bilhah and Zilpah. After enumerating all of them, it says Kol nefesh shishim v'sheish, 66. Now in English it doesn't really get expressed, but in Hebrew, if you know the grammar, this is actually Lashon Nikeva. This is a feminine language. Okay? So the question is, why would it refer to as the sum total of 66 of the descendants of Yaakov, which are primarily all sons? True, there are two females mentioned there, Dinah and Serach, the daughter of Asher. But otherwise, 64 out of the 66 are males. So why would we refer to them in the feminine, with a feminine number? Some try to answer, some of the commentaries, that is because there were some females mentioned. But that doesn't really make sense. Why? Because we know that the neutral gender in Hebrew is typical the male gender. So therefore, if you're using feminine gender, there's got to be a reason. What is the reason for it? Says the Rebbe, the explanation of all this is as follows. The number 70 that's attributed here to Bnei Yisrael, to the Jewish people, has two aspects. In the one hand is the aspect, the idea, as it corresponds to the 70 nations of the world, which is the 70 ministering angels that they have up above. It's almost like a reflection, a correspondence to that. Or there is the 70 elders, as we'll learn much later, that through them Torah, and therefore godliness, is disseminated. Later it became in the form of the Sanhedrin. In general, this is the expression of the objective or the effect that was meant to be accomplished by the descent of Yaakov and his children to Mitzrayim. In other words, they came down to Mitzrayim not by accident, not by default. This was a purpose. What was the purpose? The purpose of them was to be in Mitzrayim, yes, to be enslaved, this is all pre-planned, but all for the purpose of later receiving the Torah. And what happened by Matan Torah? What exactly was accomplished? Again, there was something that was directly related to the Jewish people and something that was related more collectively or more generally to the entire world. That which is directly connected to the Jewish people is obviously when Hashem said, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, that I, Hashem, from the loftiest of levels, Hashem, the essence of Hashem himself, becomes Elokecha, becomes your koyach and your chayus, you, meaning each individual Jew. But this is something exclusive for Bnei Yisrael. But then later we know also, as we said in the introduction, that what happened by Matan Torah, meaning because the 70 descendants of Yaakov were there in Mitzrayim, and as they evolved, and later they received the Torah, so now the 70 nations of the world also can become connected to godliness, because now the decree, that separation between the upper worlds and the lower worlds was abolished. Now Chazal tell us, as we said in the introduction, ha'avos hein hein ha-merkava, that the avos are the merkava, the chariot, meaning that they were totally given over, totally devoted and subservient to Hashem's will. That they were these unique souls that are always in Atzilus. In Atzilus, there is no separation. There is no distance from godliness. And therefore, even the way they manifest themselves in this world, they did live a physical life, but still, they were never really involved. They were never really engrossed in worldly matters. They always remained true to their source. Now, in order for this power to trickle down and have an effect, it has to go through, meaning to come down to lower levels and actually have an effect in this world, in, so to speak, the reality of the world that we live in. There, we needed the Shvatim. That's why we had the 12 tribes. And through them, it trickled down, and it evolved, it came down, level after level, until it comes down to this world. However, in order for this to happen, it's not enough that just that the Shvatim, the tribes, existed and their children through which this will trickle down, but rather, in order for it to have an effect of the world, they had to be in the world, not just in the world, but to be in the lowliest part of the world, and this is the reason why they had to descend to Mitzrayim, and Dafke in Mitzrayim. What kind of place is Mitzrayim? We know way back then, Avraham Avinu expressed about this place, there's no fear of God in this place, if you remember the story with Sarah. He said this is a place which is devoid of any whatsoever fear or even awareness of godliness. Dafka there, Dafka in Mitzrayim, specifically there, is where became revealed, became expressed the idea of Emunah. That's the place where Moshe came to them and it says, Vayaminu, Vayamin ha'am, the nation believed. That's when the Emunah came out, in the very lowliest place, and in the lowliest of times, and from there, we have it. That means you and I. From there, it's able to trickle down to all future generations. Because that's where it was really galvanized. It was solidified, the idea of Emunah in the lowliest of places through these lower levels of Yidden as they were suffering in Mitzrayim. This Emunah is the simple, what we call simple, but inherent Emunah that each and every Yid has. And this is actually the meaning of what the Chazal tell us, that our ancestors, the only reason they were freed, they were redeemed from Egypt was because of Emunah. What does this really mean? Because once they reached the point of Emunah, once that was accomplished, there was no longer a need for them to stay in Mitzrayim. Because as we said, this was the purpose, this was the objective, that they come there and in Mitzrayim, in the lowliest of places, the Shvatim find Emunah. Once they had the Emunah, once they believed, there was no longer any reason for them to stay in Mitzrayim. And this is exactly what was accomplished later on and solidified by Matan Torah when Hashem says, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, I Hashem, the loftiest, the highest point, becomes your day-to-day Elokecha, your koyach v'chayuscha, your koyach, your chayus, your day-to-day strength, your day-to-day source of energy. Now, since they went down to Mitzrayim, and it was connected with the 70 descendants, 70 souls, therefore, meaning that there had to be a number 70. They had to be 70, but they had to be in the Mitzrayim. And they were, as they came down here, as they are here in Mitzrayim, therefore there had to be a certain power. There had to be a connection to a certain source of strength, source of inspiration that should help them withstand the choshech, the darkness, the klipa of Mitzrayim. And for this, he needed to have a special level of godliness or a special level of power that is not prone or cannot be manipulated by any effect of the darkness of Egypt. And this is where the three opinions come in. One opinion says that it was Yaakov who completed the number. Why? Because since, as we said before, Yaakov is from Atzilus, which is beyond Seder Hishtalshelus, which is beyond any whatsoever order of evolvement, meaning it has no connection really to this world. As we said, the Avos, even when they lived in this world, they were higher than this world. So this will be a koyach. This will be a source of energy, a source of power that will always shine while they're in Mitzrayim, and make sure to give them the energy, to give them the power, not to get swept away by Mitzrayim. So that's why one opinion maintains that it was Yaakov. However, the other opinion says, no, it's not. It couldn't be Yaakov. Why? True. Indeed, it's true that you need to have a power that is way above and beyond any whatsoever manipulation, and therefore has to be higher than Seder Ishtalshelus. However, if you would have the power of Yaakov, as Yaakov is, then it would be so obvious and so clear that it would take away the whole aspect of Avodah. Meaning the whole benefit, the whole achievement of our personal Avodah, our personal gain is the fact is that we don't see it, it's not obvious, and we have to come to it on our own. We have to work on it. But if Yaakov would have been so prevalent, and his power would have been so obvious, that means that Silus would be so prevalent, so obvious, then there would be no challenge at all. There would be no whatsoever free choice, and therefore the Avodah would be meaningless, and it wouldn't be an accomplishment. And therefore this opinion maintains that in fact it was Hashem himself. Now Hashem is a much higher power. However, as we see in our world, Hashem energizes the whole world. What we call Soiviv Kolalman. But it's such a level that although it energizes everything, it seems to permeate nothing. Meaning it's not obvious in anything. It energizes everything, but it's not obvious in anything. And that's why this opinion maintains that it was Hashem himself, because this way it leaves room for the Choshech to seem to be a Metzias b'fnei atzmai, to seem to be an actual entity, and therefore pose a challenge, and therefore there was Bechira Chavshis, there was free choice, and thus the Avodah of Bnei Yisrael had a significance and accomplished something. And then comes the third opinion, Yochevet, who is a female. And this is the aspect of Emunah. We know that a woman is Sfiras HaMalchus. Malchus is the feminine aspect of things, as we said in the introduction. On the one hand, as we said, it's the lowliest level of all. But on the other hand, it represents the highest and the most significant thing that we have, because it's inherently connected to the aspect of Emunah. And this got expressed specifically in Yochevet. Where do we see it? Yochevet, on the one hand, from all the 70 people who descended to Mitzrayim, she was, so to speak, on the lowliest and most disadvantaged level. Why? Because she didn't even have, so to speak, the advantage, the privilege of having grown up in Yaakov's house prior to descending to Mitzrayim. In other words, she didn't have where to draw kaiches from. She was born as they entered Mitzrayim. All she knew, the world that she knew, is Mitzrayim and the enslavement, the challenges, the difficulties of Mitzrayim. And yet, on the other hand, who did she give birth to? She was the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who took him out of Mitzrayim. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who brought out in Bnei Yisrael, through the powers that he received from his mother, Yocheved, he brought out in them the idea of Vayaminu B'Hashem, that they believed in Hashem. Vayamin Ha'om, that the nation believed. And then later that led to Matan Torah. And now we can appreciate why the sum total of most of the Bnei Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah, the descendants of Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah that came to Mitzrayim, although most of them, almost all of them, were males, why it's expressed in the feminine gender? Because the whole purpose of going down to Mitzrayim was to bring out the feminine aspect of things, which is emunah, faith. And we see, says the Rebbe, in reality, that the idea of emunah, the aspect of pure faith, is more prevalent, just naturally more prevalent in women than in men. Women are more predisposed to faith in Hashem than men. Men have to work on it. Now, why indeed the feminine aspect? In other words, why couldn't it be the male aspect coupled with the idea of emunah? Why did emunah have to come through specifically the female aspect? In other words, what would have been wrong if they would have approached it from, so to speak, a masculine aspect, a masculine approach? So the Rebbe explains that there's an inherent difference between the male and the female, the masculine and the feminine approach. You see, Chazal tell us that what is the inherent idea of a zachar, a male? Darkei lichbosh. His manner is to conquer. Now, conquering is great. You conquer something. It becomes yours. But there's a flip side to it. What is the flip side to it? When you conquering something, meaning you're taking it, so to speak, to become yours against its will. It doesn't necessarily have a consent to it. Whether it consents or not, you are the conqueror. You conquer it. Yeah, it becomes subservient to you, but by default. Whereas the conquest that happens to the feminine is more of a transformation. It comes in a manner of zichuch, a purification. Yes, it's slower, but it's more effective and more of a permeative type of conquest. It's not a conquest, it's really, like I said, a transformation. And therefore, coming down to Mitzrayim, since the objective was to transform the world, that the world become a place that becomes, so to speak, compatible with Torah, or at least able to receive Torah, even which place, even the lowliest of places, or beginning with Mitzrayim, therefore there had to be a feminine approach of emunah, which comes through a manner of transformation, to take the world itself and transform it, that it itself becomes, so to speak, a receptacle to Kedusha. It becomes something that is technically, or at least capable of being compatible with Torah. Where do we see the expression of this? Well, when Hashem delivered the Makos on Mitzrayim, which it's obvious He didn't just deliver it just to get the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. There was a purpose in it. As He says, V'yodu Mitzrayim kani Hashem, that Mitzrayim should come to know and recognize my greatness. Indeed, we see that the Chartumei Mitzrayim, the sorcerers of Egypt said, oh, this is a finger of God. In other words, they started to see godliness. In short, this is the bitul of the world, but not by breaking the existence of the world, not by smashing and shattering the world, but mitzad mitzias ha'olam gufa, mitzad the mitzias of the world itself. Now this, just like it was when they were in Mitzrayim, by Golus Mitzrayim and Yitzias Mitzrayim, likewise it's in our Golus, this last Golus, which what's the purpose of it? This is a preparation for the ultimate of times, where it says, V'ra'u kol basar yachtov kipi Hashem dibar, that all flesh will see that Hashem spoke, meaning all flesh will see godliness, meaning that the entire world will be totally transformed, totally elevated. And as the Chazal tell us, what does it mean? That the prophet says that just like the days you left Egypt, I will show you wonders. That this means that just like in the days of Mitzrayim, it was in the merit of the righteous women that were in that generation that were able to leave Egypt, through whom we got the Amunah. Likewise in our time, says the Rebbe, we see this in our days in the three most prominent mitzvahs. In the highlight of the mitzvahs that the women have, that are specific for women, which is the lighting of Shabbos candles, challah, and the family purity. The lighting of Shabbos candles, says the Rebbe, and challah also represents generally the idea of kashrus, of kosher food, and taras mishpacha means pure family life. All these three things, says the Rebbe, are things that also goyim have, also goyim need. So we see how it connects to the transformation, not only of us, the 70 descendants of Yaakov, so to speak, as we are for ourselves, as it will affect us when Mashiach comes, but also the world as it reflects the 70 nations, so to speak, the world as it is, that the world becomes transformed. Because these are three things that are specifically also needed by the world. Goyim need light, Goyim need food, and Goyim need family life. And therefore, says the Rebbe, the Avodah of the women, the Nisheyu B'nai Yisrael, the women and the girls of the daughters of the women and the daughters of Israel today, in these three aspects, Neshek, the Ner Shabbos Kodesh, and Kashrus Achila, and Taras HaMishpacha, this will certainly bring the Geula, and this is the preparation that the world should become elevated and purified in order for there to be able to be the Geula.